Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please take your seats and silence your electronic devices. If you have a question for the panelists, please send it in by text or email to askmetncyber@gmail.com. You can see that address for Q&A on the screens at the side of the stage. And now, please welcome Brigadier General Paul Fredenberg, U.S. Army retired, Executive Vice President of AFC International, to the stage.
All right, good afternoon. I don't have to ask if you're awake because I know you're awake. Hey, let me just say, I hope everyone enjoyed our annual TechNet Cyber fire drill. This is becoming a tradition. So, but thank you so much for your cooperation. You guys are all very professional. Everyone was evacuated safely and now returned to the building, and there is no threats to the facility. Now, I do hope you enjoyed the additional networking time that we all gave you out in the beautiful, sunny Baltimore streets. So I hope you took advantage of that. We're going to continue with as much content as possible. This session may be truncated slightly, but we'll extend where we can and get back on schedule as soon as possible. We've built in plenty of time for you to have the public-private sector collaboration on ideas and solutions, as well as a lot of training and professional development opportunities here the rest of the afternoon. Also want to let you know, AFCEA, we are a learning and adapting association. So I'd ask that you please go within the conference app. There's a conference survey located there, and we'd like to get your feedback. We are constantly making adjustments and tweaks to give you a better experience and provide value back to our community at large. So, and we value your feedback and take it seriously. And now, it is my absolute distinct pleasure to introduce the moderator of our next session, Mr. Rob Wittmeyer. Rob serves as the DoD's Chief Software Officer for the Deputy Chief Information Officer for Information Enterprises. In his position, he is the Principal Advisor to the DoD CIO for the implementation and evolution of the department's software modernization strategy. And I'm going to stop there so that we can get on with the conversation. But he has an esteemed panel with him today, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot. Thank you very much, Rob. Welcome to you and your team to the stage.
So, not truncated, optimized, no, efficient. That's what we're about, right? So this is a DOGE Efficiency Act right now. We're going with the more efficient version of this session. So I really want to thank the panelists here, and it really is exciting to be up here in front with the three leaders that are really driving this major transformation within the department. If we look at the warfare environment that we're operating in today in Ukraine, in Israel, these are no longer traditional battles, right? This is not the set piece battles that we've been anticipating. These are algorithmic warfare. This is information warfare. The winner is the one that can adapt the fastest, the one that can take advantage of the tremendous explosion of information that we see coming in a modern battlefield, and adapt faster than the adversary in this situation. And really, that's the heart of what we're trying to achieve here with software modernization. And I'm going to give each of the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and talk about some of their key initiatives, and then we'll drill into some questions. So in the more efficient version, Sean, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So Sean Brady, I'm the Director for Software Acquisition and the DoD Software Cadre. I'm also the Deputy Director for Joint Interoperability within ANS. And I led the development of the software acquisition pathway back in October of 2020, and I'm leading the implementation of the Secretary's recent directive on modern software acquisition as well. And I think this is really a very exciting time for our profession, for the DoD software community at large. We're very grateful that Secretary Hegseth has prioritized acquisition reform and also led right out of the gate with making modernizing software acquisition as one of his first policy directives. So that's really going to energize and empower us to get after a lot of what we're trying to accomplish. It's really going to accelerate that. And really, it puts us at the forefront in this community of defense, and that's excellent. So really appreciate this. Really, the only thing that I would say in terms of our goal there with moving forward with software acquisition is that we're trying to make sure that DoD is commercial first, software centric, and also looking to be less bureaucratic and more responsive to the warfighter. And everything that we're trying to do here is in support of that. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Tom Sims. I'm from Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. I'm the Director of System Engineering and Architecture. So my portfolio covers a lot of the engineering disciplines. You know, my priority has been to strengthen the engineering across the department, right? Reinforce and incorporate new engineering principles so that we have a better outcomes through the development process. So I do that through a lot of the policy and guidance and workforce development. We have an extensive library on cto.mil, so please go see the engineering library on cto.mil and see all of the extensive documentation we have.
So Bill Dunlap, I'm the DoD Deputy CIO for Information Enterprise. I actually spent about 20 years on the R&D side, though I was with DARPA. Left there about 2 years ago as their CIO. So a lot of what I do deals with taking the pieces where the acquisition process and through what the R&D community is doing from the engineering side of the house, and then making sure that the software factories and the ecosystem that's out there is implementing those best practices, whether it be in the command and control aspects that we're working on, or the defense business system portfolio as well, with both fall under me. And then a side note, obviously, is the cloud that is one of these enabling factors that we're trying to utilize across the board, also falls under my portfolio as well.
Okay, great. So Sean, first of all, congratulations on working with the Secretary of Defense on getting the memo signed out on the software pathway accelerating. I know you've been spending time with the SecDef, with the President, with the Hill. So what are you hearing from the senior leadership regarding the importance of software modernization and these approaches?
Thanks, Rob. I think the consistent message that we're hearing across the executive branch and also Congress is that they want DoD to be operating faster and with more agility. It's as I stated before, we keep pounding that home that it's commercial first, less bureaucratic, and more responsive to the warfighter. So really, from the perspective of the software acquisition pathway memo or directing modern software acquisition, there's two key drivers that we really want folks to understand why we're going about this and why we're doing this. The first driver is the mission. So we understand that our combat support systems and our weapon systems, that functionality is driven by software. And it's really software that allows us to adapt our systems so that they're more responsive to rapidly changing threats, rapidly changing priorities and requirements, as well as technology opportunities. That's exceedingly important on the modern battlefield. So the mission is really driving why we need to get after more streamlined acquisition. The second piece is commercial innovation, which I understand this group would care deeply about. It's in commercial industry where software innovation is occurring. Those innovation cycles there are much faster. We're talking about going from idea to product in days, weeks, and months, and not on the traditional timelines that you may have seen in DoD. That's not really going to work for us. And what we're trying to do here, we want to take advantage of those commercial solutions that are available. We also want to take advantage of the commercial software development talent that understands how to build product in that Darwinian marketplace. They understand the people, processes, and tools to get that done. So we want to take advantage of that. We want a software acquisition system that's far more responsive, more dynamic to keep pace with the dynamic fight and outpace our adversaries. And so that's why the secretary is basically saying, hey, we're going to mandate the software acquisition pathway. And if you think about that, the software acquisition pathway is really itself based on commercial development practices, right? So I call it the lean startup for DoD, where we rapidly build, measure, and learn through the delivery of minimum viable products, where we have intense warfighter involvement. That's to prioritize those requirements, make sure we're getting feedback on the systems that we're developing, and also make sure we're using modern software practices like DevSecOps, which our team is working to push across the department so we can automate the build, test, and release process and match the speed expected of the software acquisition pathway. And the last thing that we're doing with the software pathway is I think it really approximates commercial sector behavior when we use the secret weapon of the pathway, the value assessment. So that's where we have the operational sponsor and the warfighter basically giving the solution developer, the program manager, a report card on whether or not that system meets their unmet need. And that will drive decisions on how we should pivot or persevere, both in terms of how we build and what we build. That's really key. If you're thinking about the commercial sector, you're not going to get more than 18 months of runway to make a determination that my product is fulfilling an unmet need in the marketplace. They'll need to deploy capital in more productive places and pivot what they're doing if they're not able to do that. So we want that behavior too, to make sure we're being efficient and dynamic in our delivery. And then the second thing is innovative contracting that's companion to this commercial-based software acquisition approach. And that by using and mandating as a default commercial solutions openings and other transactions, what we're really trying to do is lower the barriers of entry for non-traditionals and have faster, more flexible solicitation and award procedures so that we can get access to these innovative solutions, these innovative players at speed and scale to match what we're trying to do. Ultimately, it's the combination of the two. When you combine the software acquisition pathway with the solicitation and award approaches, these dynamic, more innovative contracting approaches, CSOs and OTs, that's how we're going to set the business conditions to make sure we're meeting the intent of the secretary moving forward. So I think that's really key.
So one part on that too, and just talking about the acquisition side of it, but also, and you mentioned the commercial sector and the DoD aspect of it. So there are things that within the DoD, I would say that we are a unicorn, right? They're unique to the way we do business. But there's a lot of the things that we're asking the commercial sector to do that are not unicorns. And often these programs that we're trying to resolve through the software pathway or through the modern software practices also could use a little bit of help from both the industry and from the DoD side, where we don't always have to have it, that button doesn't always have to be in that exact spot for the software to operate the way it's supposed to. The other would be, my challenge to the commercial group would be, when we ask for something, tell us, hey, this thing already does that, right? This software suite that you already own is already capable of pulling off what you're asking to do. You don't have to create it custom, and we can still get to where you want to be. There are always going to be laws that we have to follow, unique to the US government and specifically the DoD, but there's a lot of things where I think we generate customization in these products that aren't required because that's just the way we've always done it. And so we need the DoD to weigh in on that piece and be willing to adapt, but we also need the commercial sector to say, hey, there is another way to do that. Have you thought about just using whatever product it is, out of the box? It does exactly what you're asking. The background's blue, not green, right? So it's just things like that we need to take on as a way to change the way we do business to make some of these things move faster as well.
Yeah. Okay, so we hit on acquisition, we hit on reliance on and our partnership with commercial industry, how to drive some greater innovations there. We're using the term software, but we know that that's more of a code word because we actually mean more of a full digital modernization. And I know cloud computing has been one of the top priorities for the software modernization strategy. And I know, Bill, you have cloud as one of your key deliverables. So as we're looking at these modern platforms, how do we drive more pervasive modernization as part of this strategy? Where do we stand with cloud right now? Are we still moving forward?
So at some level, I would say that, at least from a department perspective, keep doing what you're doing. If I look to where we were, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, the progress that we have made moving to the cloud has been incredible. I would say that if you're, and I hope there's not a lot of that in the room, but if you're new to it, go back and learn some lessons from the people that have migrated. I think early on, and I'll say that I was probably one of the ones that ran into this issue, is to the cloud, meant pick everything I've got up and just dump it in the cloud and see I'm done. And realizing really early on that was not the way to tackle that problem. So I would say take a look at the applications, and this is one of the things that we drove out of our office in some of the budget drills and some of the technical assessments we've been doing, is making sure obviously the application you're utilizing is cloud ready, for lack of a better way to put it. But even turning on, if you're going to go build something new, look at cloud native. The other part I would say too, and it kind of goes back to what I talked about on the last one, is do you really need to have a unique capability, or are there currently, using the software acquisition pathway or other tools, are there SaaS capabilities out there that can answer the question of what you're trying to do, so that you can focus your effort on those unique things that are unicorns within the DoD. The other piece I would say, and this kind of goes in the contracting side or the acquisition side as well, is be adaptable, right? Because this marketplace is changing so fast, and I'll tip my hat to the J9 crew. I don't know if they're in here right now or not, over at DISA. Did a lot of work over the past couple months with the Army, and specifically Leo Garcia and his team in the CIO's office, and adapted their acquisition process to deal with specifically requirements that the Army had and the way they did business in the cloud. So it's being adaptable on the technical side, but it's also being able to adapt on the acquisition side, because these technologies are moving so fast that you wrote a contract 2 years ago and it doesn't account for the technology that came out yesterday. So you got to be willing to adjust fire based on what's going on in front of you. But again, I think the bottom line would be is for the DoD partners in the room, keep doing what you're doing from the commercial side of the house. Keep pushing our capabilities into that threshold and helping us make that migration, and helping us with the applications that you're developing on our behalf to move into that infrastructure. Because once we're there, the ability to adapt is obviously well beyond anything I can do on-prem.
So I know we've seen, building off of the acquisition strategy, building off modern platforms like cloud, but I think we always continue to run into this cultural challenge, right? So Tom, as we look at the process side of this, as we look at the standards, the policies, what are you seeing from your perspective in terms of how we're transforming there?
Yeah, so we're definitely in the digital transformation, and we're doing it through a couple of things that are in my job jar. Most a modular open systems approach. So that's a congressional language statutory requirement, Title 10. The definition in the Title 10 says it applies to hardware, software, and/or an integrated assembly of both. So we're driving the designs to have more modularity, and that includes both the systems and software systems as well. Those modules will have commercial and consensus-based standards. So we're trying to drive more modularity into the system design process. Along with that, we have the digital engineering instruction. So the digital engineering instruction came out in December 2023. It requires all new programs to incorporate digital engineering into their process. So digital engineering's about moving from a paper-based process, so old system engineering process was heavily paper, moving it to a digital engineering process, what moves it into the digital realm. When we say move it into the digital realm, we move it into digital models with underlying data. So we're trying to get programs to do more digitally modeling. So another thing we have in the job jar is APIs, right? So we released the API guidebook, establishing a data-centric approach to making better decisions, sharing data, making better data-driven decisions. Along with that, we have the System Engineering Guidebook. So the System Engineering Guidebook is currently going through an update. We hope to get that update out there to the workforce. We're going to make sure that we incorporate the SecDef's new memo into that guidebook so that we're driving software engineering in the right direction in accordance with the SecDef's memorandum. So those are the areas that I see.
I think the other piece there, just to pile on, Tom, is that it's been a great partnership with Arnie and A&S, and this API strategy, moving the DoD to API first, is going to be important. And in the software acquisition pathway, update that we're going to do to bring it in line with the SecDev memo, we're also going to make sure that we include an API strategy where the program manager has to think through and reveal how they're going to make their services available, make their data available, and then the technical guidance that Tom's working is going to allow for that to be implemented in 360.
Yeah, so I hope the audience is realizing, so we have 3 superpowers represented here in the department with ANS, with R&E, and with CIO, and listening to these different themes and what each is bringing to this transformation. So Bill, as you look at your partnership with your counterparts here, as we look at the software modernization side of things, what are your takes on how this is evolving?
So I mean, we meet regularly, and we bring forth our proposals. I mean, you mentioned specifically just now the API piece of the house that we've been discussing over the past year or so that I've been involved in it, and the acquisition pieces that have become more of a focus, especially over the past 2 or 3 months. And then on our side of the house, the DevSecOps part of it, and trying to change. And I think the 3 of us, or the 3 groups combined, are trying to change the culture of the way we do business, and that's always tough. I think that you hear a lot about Agile, you hear a lot about DevOps, DevSecOps, and often the right things are said in the room, but it's also changing the culture behind the scenes so that we're actually executing against those. So I'll talk a little bit from an experience perspective of often try to get security integrated from the start on programs or efforts, and that's more difficult than it sounds, right? I mean, we all say the right things. Yes, we want security in the room from the beginning, but often they don't get invited through the door when we're doing the design work. And I know there's been a lot of discussion in various forums about the RMF and how the accreditation process works and what we can do to make that better. I would throw out there that outside of everything else that they're working on, bring the security team in from the beginning, right? Have that process in your development pipeline where you are validating the security of that application as it is going through the process, right? Put the tools in place, put the automation in place, that from start to finish, so that when the software comes out of the other side, we know it's good to go and we don't have to spend a lot of time doing an assessment. So that's one of the pieces I'm working on, but I think you mentioned superpowers. It's great to have 3 primary people responsible for the software throughout the department get together on a regular basis and say, here's what I want to do. Here's what I'm bringing forward. How does this impact what you're working on? You've got something coming out from a software acquisition perspective. I've got something that falls right in that. You just add it right in there and we're off to the races. I don't have to do my own DoD issuance, another instruction everybody has to read. We work together to combine all these pieces into a common strategy of how we attack things.
Yeah, so building off the DevSecOps, looking at the process transformation, Tom, I know, as we take that digital engineering and look at what's it take to operate IT systems, warfighting systems, weapon systems in today's modern environment, I know we always run into that workforce challenge. I know that's been one of your specific areas of interest, and how do we develop that workforce? So what are your thoughts on how we're progressing there?
So yeah, I kind of wear 3 hats when it comes to workforce. The acquisition workforce is broken up into 7 different functional areas. I'm the functional leader for 2 of those areas, and that's the engineering and technical management as well as the T&E workforce. So I drive the curriculum, I drive the competency model and drive that to DAU, and then on the back side I look to make sure that the learning assets or the training material is technically accurate and consistent with the DoD policy, so that we make sure that we have the checks and balances when we give that material to the workforce. So there's a whole certification process. There's a foundational and a practitioner certification process for engineering and technical management that gives them kind of the basics. Then we've implemented this whole new structure called credentials. So there'll be a whole series of credentials in the ETM and T&E functional area. So we do have a credential now on modernization of software. So there is a credential out there for the workforce to take, and they are taking it. And we have about 7 or 8 more credentials in the process. Those 7 or 8 credentials are in various stages of development, but as soon as we have learning assets, which is the training material associated with those credentials, we release that to the workforce so that they get an early look into what is actually the training material associated with the credential. If they take that training material, they can eventually get that credential once it's formally released. So we have a huge push in software. So one of the other hats I wear is I'm a functional community leader. So there's functional communities are broken up by OC series. So OC series are, the occupational series for the government workforce. So I have what's called the engineering non-construction, and I have the quality OC series. So what I look for across that is what's the staffing levels across the department in those OC series, and I look for gaps. I look where it's hard to get people to hire people, and then I go out and I seek maybe some incentive funds or whatever to make sure that we can get those people in those right OC series. So a more recent kind of area that we've been developing in the DoD is called work roles. So CIO did an extensive review of cyber in those work roles, and they've implemented a process to identify their cyber people in the DoD. Our leadership back a year or two ago said, hey, can we apply that to software? So we got the task of developing those software work roles. So we've now developed 8 software work roles, and now the services are looking across their workforce to identify how many people across the department are actually doing workforce. Because the OC series don't really tell you how many people doing workforce, and the functional areas don't really tell you. So that's been a major effort, trying to understand what the department has as far as software people, making sure that they have the training, and we built all that training out through the engineering and technical management functional area.
Yeah. So we're going to go to questions in just a second. I have one last question for Sean here, but we've covered a lot of topics in a short period of time, so hopefully if there's any of those that are of interest to you, you'll get your questions in. But with that, so Sean, as we talk about workforce, obviously, and we're here at a conference with a lot of our defense industrial base, that we rely upon. What changes do you see with our engagement with the defense industrial base? What do you see as we're looking at our legacy systems and the movement to these modern systems? Does this apply, these approaches, to our legacy systems? And how does this impact our relationship with the defense industrial base?
Yeah, definitely for greenfield programs that are just starting out, you have a fresh opportunity to put these workhorse existing authorities right into play. But there's an understanding that with those legacy systems, there's going to have to be a process by which, if it's a business system, so we migrate and modernize it so it's cloud native, that's going to require some effort. You can do that on the software acquisition pathway, certainly. But yeah, there is some effort where some of these legacy systems that we need to connect to, we're going to have to dive in there and find out where there's a logical transition point. Certainly, if a new contract is coming up, we would look at applying these tools that we just discussed. But overall, I think there's a lot of work that we need to do at A&S to make this work. So you're talking about engaging with the services, engaging with the components, as well as with industry. I think we have a foundation that we've been building over these last 4 years. So after we launched the software pathway in October of 2020, it was a contact sport. So it's been a very high op-tempo, relentless effort to work with programs on my team. It's called the DoD Software Cadre, where we work with those programs to make sure that we can accelerate innovative contracting strategies, remove any roadblocks, speak with their leadership, their CAEs, their SAEs, and have the conversation on why we need to push these folks into the software pathway faster. We've been very successful with that. I think we've engaged over 100 commands and PMs in only a few years with a very lean and mean team. And that's paid big dividends, where we've increased the population of the software pathway by now approximately 400%. We have 82 programs in there. Additionally, over these last 4 years, we've been putting out a lot of web guidance. So if we hear a pain point from a program manager or a PEO, or see something as we're learning while leading with this new way of doing business, we certainly update our web guidance and have provided a ton of resources, a lot of road shows, a lot of training, a lot of outreach, and that goes for both industry and the services. So we think that we've established a foundation, and now it's about scaling it. So if that's positioned us to build upon that adoption, really we've seen it across the services, the military branches. Certainly SOCOM is a big adopter as they innovate, and the fourth estate agencies. We have this baseline to scale upon, and to do that, we're going to be standing up the DoD software cadre to make sure that we have greater capacity to help those programs that need to understand how do I actually apply a CSO and OT intelligently, how do I accelerate my adoption of the software pathway. Additionally, as part of those 4 years, I think what we've been doing is also not being happy to just put the material acquisition process out there, but constantly looking at how we reshape and adjust adjacent processes. So we work with the Joint Staff and on an accelerated, expedited JSIS process, and we've actually helped programs get through that and validate a requirement within only 40 days. So that is the theoretical timeline, and that's an example of one of the processes we leaned out. It also goes for cost estimation. We cut the cost estimation timeline in half working with our partners at CAPE. They've been fantastic. And that's because the software pathway has a very rapid planning phase. So we need to have streamlined artifacts, accelerated processes to intelligently move out and get into the execution phase as fast as possible. And the last point I would make is we also have subpaths in the software pathway where effectively any system type can now take advantage of it, gain the benefits from that pathway. We started out by congressional direction to include an application and a embedded weapon system, which has some nuance associated with those unique compliance environments. But Congress said you can add as many subpaths as you need to make sure there's a tailored way that, for example, and this is something we'll partner with Bill on, how more business systems in the department can shift over to using the software pathway. I'm looking forward to teaming with you on that. But we created a DBS subpath in 2022, and we'll be creating more subpaths, potentially exploring an AI to get after the nuances there too. So.
Yeah. So obviously a lot of work going on, a lot of work that's happening to accelerate all of these efforts at this point in time. Okay, I think we have time for some questions from the audience. So we're looking for some really difficult, insightful questions.
Thank you. The first question, with the push to more commercial solution offerings, are we moving away from the government pursuing data rights?
Sounds like an acquisition question.
Yeah, no, you are free when you are using another transaction. You'll go through a negotiation process. You can take advantage and tailor what IP makes sense. It's not a one-size-fits-all, whether it's government purpose rights. But if there's a proprietary solution that can accelerate our ability to effectively prosecute our mission and be successful, that is part of the acquisition process where you figure out what is best, right? But certainly from a perspective where we're trying to gain competitive advantage with concepts like CJAT C2, we obviously need access to the data. We want to be able to bring in new analytics, new data streams, new feeds, and build on top of existing software or data stores. So that is obviously a very key consideration. I think Tom talked about the API strategy. Certainly we're going to be putting out the guidance necessary to make sure you understand how you can ensure you're getting the data rights and having well-documented APIs and access to the services and data that you need. I don't know if you want to add anything, Rob, or...
Yeah, so an ongoing consideration, right? Make
Ongoing.
sure you have the rights you need, but make those right trade-offs. Okay, next question.
Many DoD system of systems are complex and require unique integration based on operational need. The software pathway acquisition using CSOs and OTAs accounts for purchase of commercial product/capability, but how is it accounting for CPFF-related integration services?
I would say that you're not limited necessarily if you were to use an other transaction. You're not limited necessarily to any one given contract type, but certainly a firm fixed price option is going to present itself. And in the software pathway, indeed, by the way, OTs are being used extensively in the software acquisition pathway along with commercial solutions openings. And we do see within that subset, and that's a growing set, and obviously with the Secretary Hegseth's memo, that's going to increase. But we do see as the dominant contract type firm fixed price, and that makes sense for a lot of reasons, especially as you're trying to lower barriers of entry for new entrants, and you're talking about not having the ability to go through the typical process or have a sophisticated cost accounting system. However, I would just point out that you can still have different approaches where perhaps you need a T&M CLIN. You can certainly bake that in. There may be some exquisite, really hard to do type software where that makes sense, and you can incorporate that. So again, it goes back to what we were talking about, Rob. Certainly, you can adapt and adjust as required. But certainly we see a dominance in that aspect.
Yeah, and I'll just add, so we're going through some of the traps in these questions, right? As we look at, a lot of people think that the software mod strategy means go do agile, go do stuff really fast, and don't think through processes beforehand. That's not the case, right? So we often see, as we hit on intellectual property, think through those concerns. Think about data ownership. When we look at systems of systems, one of the traps can be not thinking through the architectural needs up front, and then having to refactor the system when you realize the full complexity of what the new application needs to do. So don't get caught in that trap, because I'll tell you, if you get a year or two down the road and you determine that your core foundation architecture needs to be refactored, that is very costly in terms of time and money. So I just wanted to get through, that's a common misperception that when we're talking about these paths, we mean go do stuff really fast and don't think through the problem to begin with. And certainly, Tom, from a systems engineering perspective, digital engineering, we want to make sure we have those foundations.
Exactly,
right?
and we have a system of systems engineering guide out there. Yeah. We are in the process of looking at that guide. It's dated. Working with some of the system of systems out there to understand where they see issues, trying to incorporate better practices in that system of systems guide, as well as more MOSA, right? MOSA with the modularity and the common interfaces helps alleviate some of that.
Okay, cool themes. Time for more?
With the accelerated application of commercial software and an inevitable need for ongoing software maintenance, how will new vulnerabilities be managed at this accelerated pace?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess I hate to say it depends, but it depends. I mean, it depends on the software we're talking about. Yeah, so I mean, I was going to say the CATO piece, and that goes back to the DevSecOps principles and having those, the tools in line with the development so that you're tracking those pieces so that when you, again, spit out something on the other side, you can deploy it immediately to plug an identified vulnerability, deal with a bug that's been found, whatever that may be. I mean, commercial side, I mean, that's actually one of the advantages I would wave the flag on for going to a SaaS scenario where you take the full power of the vendor that you're working with from a vulnerability patching management perspective and let them run that versus multiple people throughout the department having to address those individually. But for in-house, I think that the pieces we're talking about with the continuous ATO, the DevSecOps principles, drive that to be faster and more effective at responding to vulnerabilities as they're identified.
I couldn't let this go without a plug for the software fast track. So we do have, as we look at CATO and how do we build modern RMF sorts of infrastructures based on automation and some of the modern tooling that's out there, but we do have 3 RFIs on the street right now from the CIO looking at the software fast track, where we're looking at how can we establish a standard for software supply chain controls and then provide an accelerated path for software that meets those controls. So if you're interested in that topic, please respond to those RFIs. We're looking at all the feedback from industry, and that includes everything building on SBOMs, CVEs, VEX, and then the enrichment activities that go around, taking all the factors that might be in an SBOM. How do I enrich that with my understanding of what are the potential vulnerabilities, potential threats represented by that piece of software? So those RFIs close on the 20th, so there's a couple weeks left. But please, if that's a topic, please industry respond to those for us.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd reiterate this is the opportunity, because I get a lot of feedback on this exact topic, and we talk about the approval of software as it comes into the department to be utilized. This is an opportunity to speed some of that up. So take those RFIs, take a look at them, and if you've got something that helps in that regard, send it in so we can take a look at how can we speed up acquisition, but then finally the approval of that software to be utilized in the department.
We have time for one more question. What's the plan to recruit, retain, and grow world-class software talent within the DoD, including military officers, civilians, and contractors?
So, as I said before, we're building that training material through DAU. So it's an online type courses. So we have one credential out there that's for software modernization, and we have 7 more in the process. And we hope to get those out over the next 6 months to get those credentials out there so that we can then give the workforce the ability to take that training, maintain their proficiency and skills in software modernization. We're also looking at where are the gaps in the workforce so that we can help fill those gaps. And I talked about Ox Series, and we're trying to understand how many people through work roles are doing software in the department, and then we got to figure out how many people we need to do software in the department so that we can then build on that current workforce. So we're doing a number of things, but it's a little bit of a challenge. It's a lot of dynamics going on.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't also say from a cyber perspective, I don't know if he's in the audience or not, but Mark Gorek is here from the DoD CIO's office. Mentioned earlier the cyber review that was done from a workforce perspective. He will actually be talking about that topic. I don't know if it's today or tomorrow. You can obviously check the schedules, but if you want to hear more about how those things are being implemented in the department, how we're trying to recruit, how we're trying to retain, he's a perfect person to go listen to from a cyber perspective, and it translates into many of the things that are going on the software side as well.
Yeah. So I wanted to thank the audience first because this transformation takes all of us. This has been about a 5-year journey, I think, for most of us here on terms of the software modernization. We will be briefing in other sessions the new implementation plan. So we had the first implementation plan. We're now transitioning to our second version, updated version for the next 2-3 years, the implementation plan around these activities. But this is not something that we can drive by ourselves up here. It takes all the activities and great work that everyone here on Industrial Base, our counterparts and our colleagues. So I want to appreciate that. I want to say my sincere thanks to the panel here. And this is going to be an interesting journey because I know it's only getting faster every day. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Fredenberg back to the stage.
Thank you, Rob, and to your entire senior steering group for that great presentation. Thanks for joining us here today. That was the more efficient and optimized version done in that quick time. But more importantly, it was a very effective communication with the audience here. In lieu of a speaker gift, FC is going to make a donation to the Fisher House on your behalfs. All right, ladies and gentlemen, in a second, I hope you're going to be able to see session highlights for this afternoon's program on the screens on the side of the stage. And please consult your conference app for a full schedule and additional information. We're going to take a very quick break in place for less than 5 minutes because we have to reset the stage. And then we are going to bring up a panel featuring leaders from our cyber and information domain. So stand up, take a quick stretch break for about 5 minutes. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you right here for the next session.